So lesson 16, let's start talking about data privacy and then some protections we take in order to protect the data, the information that we're working with, some of the files that we work with on a daily basis. Let's talk about some of the concepts that we use to protect it. So when we first started talking about Security Plus, we always just kind of referred everything back to the CIA triad. Remember that triangle image that I showed where it said confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And then, based on how your business is set up, you will either focus on either a confidential factor or an integrity factor or the availability of the data. But however you want to focus those main attributes is still based on how do we protect our data, how do we make it available, and then making sure that we keep it true to the changes that we make. So that's the integrity part. So we want to make sure that we always keep those things in mind. We want to make sure that the privacy, when it comes to who can see it, the confidentiality and the integrity part is something that we also focus on, no matter if we're just needing the information to be available most of the time. We still want to make sure that the privacy aspect of it is still upheld to a high regard. This is also uh, we want to make sure that we have these things in place for data when it comes to its life cycle. And that's when, we first create a file, we first create that Word document and we put the first words on it, and we create that file. Once we save it, it's created. And then if other people are using it, they edit it or make some changes to it in some type of fashion, we want to make sure that those things are upheld. And we want to make sure that if it's some type of important document, uh, is really comes down to what's in the document. When it goes to the retention, how long do we actually keep it? So whatever the document is, if it's legal wise, we may want to keep it for so many years, even if this person is no longer with the company. And then we need to have a proper way of disposing uh, old data, as well as data that's actually written on physical paper. How do we go about disposing those type of information and making sure that we do it in a proper, secure way? Now, just because you create a file doesn't necessarily mean that you will be the owner of a file. But 9 times out of 10, you probably are the owner, and we need to have some type of roles and access to the types of files and data that is actually created on our network, and then in who's responsible for the creation and then the maintenance, the availability of that type of data. So in CompTIA, they put roles and responsibilities on these type of individuals who actually own the data. And your data owner is 9 times out of 10 going to be a department manager, where they may not and I want to get kind of granular here, where they may not see everything that you create, but they're responsible for everything that you do create. And that's more likely a data owner when it comes to a high level, when you're looking down at it from a 10,000 feet view. So a data owner is going to be ultimately responsible for any and every piece of data that comes out within their department. The steward will actually have more of a closer insight to how the data is actually maintained, and the quality of the data. So that'll be kind of like your security analysts, your IT technicians. They're going to actually be the stewards of how this data is moving from one platform to the next. Custodians and stewards could uh, those same people can hold the same types of roles. It could be interchangeable. And in some places we have a data privacy officer, but in my personal experiences, I haven't seen them with that actual title. So just want to make sure that you understand, one, a data owner. A data owner is going to probably be that high level manager, that department manager that oversees everyone in that department. May not see everything that you do as far as data is concerned, but they are responsible for that data. Now, when it comes to data classification, you will see different businesses have different types of classifications for their data. And the biggest difference that I've seen is being in the military, where you'll have a structure of unclassified, classified, secret, top secret, things of that nature. So these labels will be put on different types of devices physically, and they'll be meta tagged with the sensitive items when it comes to data that's on our PCs or laptops. And so 9 times out of 10, when you have a clearance like that within the government sector, you'll probably have a security clearance saying that you have authorization to actually view the content that's labeled for you to see. And what I mean by that is that if you have a secret clearance, you probably could see everything that says public and unclassified, but you're not able to see anything that's top secret. Now, to go to top secret, if you have a security clearance that has a top secret clearance, you'll be able to see everything from top clearance and down to a security clearance, and also at the further the bottom point of unclassified. But anything above a top secret clearance, not too sure if they have one above top secret, but if they do, then you're not allowed to see that as well. So just know that it's very strict when it comes to the government sector of it, but in a civilian sector, when it comes to classified information, we need to understand that each amount of data that is classified, that's where we want to make sure that people have the right permissions in order to see that data, and more importantly, to make changes to that data, to move that data. So we want to make sure that whenever we are creating sensitive items, that we tag these items properly in order to keep that type of classification on them, and then putting them in the right hands when it comes to permissions. So some of your more famous data types could be PII, which is personal identifying information. So that's going to be your name, date of birth, social security, birth date, anything that is describing you as a person, an individual, that can easily be taken and then used to qualify someone else as you, acting as you with that information. So we want to make sure that we are aware of those type of that type of information that's put out there. But that PII also goes into the customer data too, where a lot of times we can't go into a store now without giving up some type of personal identifiable information. Even if you're just signing up for couponing, they want your address, your physical address, to mail you something, or they want a email address from you so they can, again, give you that type of service that you need. But you want to make sure that, whenever, if it's not necessary to give up that information, that we want to refrain from that. And also when we're training our employees to actually go out here and maybe go on business trips, to be aware of what type of information that they're giving up about themselves as well as the company as well. So moving on from that, we also have of course, health information when it comes to HIPAA, and having things when it comes to the health field, as far as test results, what type of medication that we may be on. Those things that are secret to us need to be tagged in a certain way. Of course, in the financial field, when we all think about our bank accounts, those are things that we want to hold sensitive, and make sure that we have the confidentiality into it to where we can only get to it, but also that integrity factor of no one. If I look in there and see $5,000, I need to make sure that that's my money and that it hasn't been taken away from or added to without my acknowledgement and my consent. So with privacy notices and data retention, this goes back into the type of laws and litigations that's put in place in order for us to gather this information, but also keep it safe, and keep that confidentiality attribute held on that data. So the main thing that you really want to take from this slide is the the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR. And we want to make sure that we understand that this regulation is put in place in order to provide a standard how we should collect data and then keep that data safe. And understand that the people that we gather this information from, we need to let them know what we're gathering, and then how long will we keep that information. I want you guys to think about something. When you fill out applications for these new jobs, how long are they actually keeping the information on your application or within their data banks? So I've seen a couple of businesses have, when you fill out an application, they will say we'll keep your information on file for the next 2 years. And that gives me an indication that, okay, if they are under any kind of breach, then my information could be leaked out because of them keeping it for the next 2 years. So I want you just kind of think about that when it comes to data retention, that it's not necessarily because they want to harvest your information and then sell it out, but it may be that they're under a law, some type of regulation, in order to keep that data and make sure that it's secure. Now, if they're securing it, that's another whole, factor, but they are gathering the information that you give voluntarily. So data sovereignty and geographical considerations. The main thing that I want you to really take away from that is that when you're submitting some type of information to a cloud provider, it's important to understand where they're located at, where a lot of these companies are, to back up, we're all connected on this globe. So you may be contacting a company that's based in Britain and is under the EU standards and regulations, but yet you're stationed here in the United States. So the way they handle your information is way different than how we deal with it here in the States. So we want to make sure that we are aware that we can't just put our customers or our clients' information on different servers within different geographical locations. That's where we need to be aware of how does that country actually run their laws and regulations when it comes to PII, and how long should, if we're going to go that route, what's the regulations? How do we govern ourselves in order to have our data hosted in another foreign land? So privacy on the breaches and the data breaches. So whenever we do have a breach, it's important that we understand the process we need to take in order to letting people know that we have had a breach or data has leaked out. So we want to make sure that we have the proper escalation up to the higher ups to let them know what's happened, and if we have a gather on it, or if it's still kind of out of our control. So we want to make sure that that process is refined, but we also want to make sure that upper management has a process to actually let our customers know, our clients know that, hey, there has been a breach, and this is the process that you need to take as a customer in order to protect your data as much as possible, given the fact that damage has been done. So throughout our course, we already touched on these two different types of policies and documents that we want to have in our arsenal. We want to make sure that, when it comes to data sharing and then the privacy terms, that our SLAs will have those type of um, things addressed in them when it comes to working with a third party. Also having that NDA, that non-disclosure agreement between a third party, is very important. If we're sharing things that make us, our business, unique to us, and we're going to share that with you in order to see if we want to have your services. It may be the fact that we might not want to go with you as a vendor, but in order to vet out and make sure that we hire the right vendor, I might need you to sign an NDA to make sure that you're not going to share my business secrets with anyone else or try to go into business against me, using my business model against me. So making sure that you have these policies in place, making sure that you have that server level agreement, making sure that, they are providing the customer service. I'm sorry, providing the service to you that you need, because you just don't want to hang your reputation on a third party, but you want to make sure that you both agree to the an agreement saying that, hey, if I'm using you to hold my customers' data, then I want you to have a certain standard that you will protect their data at. So making sure that we have those things in line will also ultimately make us a better secure company. So I think this slide should have been a little bit higher up in the show, but protecting the data at rest as well as in transit, and making sure that we have it protected during the use of changing it, and making sure that the integrity is correct whenever we do change it, is very important. We want to make sure that, when it's resting, it's not being used at that time, it's sitting somewhere on a hard drive and just waiting to be accessed, then we want to make sure that it's encrypted. And of course, we want to make sure that we have that encryption moving data from one source to another. So we want to make sure that we have, whenever it's traveling across the network, that we have that encrypted in capsule around our data. So in this lesson, you also want to make sure that, how does data leave your network? Not necessarily just thinking about the daily tasks that we do in order to hold business, but how are other ways data could actually leave from your possession out into the open or into the wrong hands. One way could be through USB ports, where someone can bring in a external device, a USB thumb drive, and plug it into your PCs, and then take that data and then take it to wherever they will want to take it. Using things such as a cloud hoster, where someone is they have a Dropbox account or a Google Drive account that's accessing that network, that cloud provider within your network, and transferring data that way. That, is it's an open access to exfiltrate your data out of your possession into a data provider that doesn't you're not having any kind of security control over. So we want to make sure we have things in place such as DLPs, devices, data loss prevention providers that can see the data moving in a non-secure way. We want to make sure that we have our CASBs in place, that if we see that type of data leaving into a cloud provider, that we are able to flag and stop that type of data from moving out. So keeping these things in place will allow you to have some type of control, security control over access points that come into your network, and you're not necessarily aware of it. So going into the data loss prevention, just like I said before, is going to look at that traffic that's leaving out and seeing if there's any kind of sensitive tagging to it. Is it a sensitive item? Is it a secret item, top secret item? Does it have PII in it? Does it have any type of social security numbers, banking routing numbers, and account numbers? Is it a larger number of data that's leaving out? Your DLPs should be able to see that, flag it, and then stop it. And it can look at it via the emails that we send out as clients. Sometimes we send emails out, or it could see it as someone taking a file and then transferring it to a USB thumb drive. Some DLP systems will even detect if someone takes a picture of the screen with their cell phone, and then they can alert you on that, and then we can have a early jump on data moving out that way. So this is lesson 17, performing incident response. So it's not about um, how to prevent a incident from happening. We're pretty much going to have an event always happening, and we need to know what to do when those events happen. And whenever those data breach happens, we want to make sure that we have taken the correct steps in order to bring the business back into working order, and make sure that we stop the breach, the leakage, as much as possible. So let's get into it. So this is the incident response process. This is where we have 6 different things that we want to make sure that we do, and they kind of all flow back into each other whenever we finish that last step. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we prepare our security controls correctly, make sure that we have everything in place. This is where we plan and prepare and design our security stack in order to make sure that we have the best security for our data. Then we want to make sure that we um, identify if a breach has happened. So we want to make sure that we have a good identification if a breach is actually happening, if a leakage is actually happening, going on. We want to make sure that we understand it. We have a good understanding of what it is, and then once we have that good understanding, we want to make sure that we contain it. Make sure that we stop the spread of it. So if it's a virus and it's constantly spreading from one PC to the next, we want to make sure that we get those things off the network and make sure we contain it as quick as possible. Then once we contain it, we want to make sure that we eradicate it. That's to actually kill it or stop the leakage. If someone is transferring files out, we want to make sure that we have things that can go ahead and stop that file transference outside of the network. And then once we have that, we have eradicated the issue, then we can work on the recovery road if we need to actually load from backups in the case of a ransomware attack, or we need to, do some reimages on some PCs and make sure that they're starting from a clean slate. And then once we have those things in play, we want to do a lesson learned or a post incident activity session with the people involved in the incidents. So when I mean by involved with the incident, not necessarily your victim, but your incident handling team. That'll be the people who are working in the security group to actually, work together to get things identified and then contained and then eradicated. So we want to make sure that we have a lessons learned with them, and then from there we want to take the things that we've learned in that incident and then prepare us, going back to the first step, prepare us on the next time we have an incident that happens. And then when it comes to the recovery, we want to make sure that we understand that, hey, if we didn't identify certain products then we make sure that we have the identification down and more in tune for the next time. And that's how these steps kind of constantly flow with each other each time. Now, as I stated before about how you'll have a team that works together that's strictly for getting a incident handled, identifying and then handling those incidents and making sure that they stop them before they become into real big problems or lingering problems. And 9 times out of 10, this is called a cyber incident response team. And these teams are specializing at looking at the flow of traffic, looking at things that are normal in the business flow, and then seeing if there's anything that they need to proceed with when it comes to actually putting the plan in process. 9 times out of 10, these are around the clock teams. So 24 hours, they probably are watching your logs, watching traffic flow in and out of your company, and then being able to alert you at any given time. When it comes to an incident. And for my case, my company has a third party vendor that does this for us, where they constantly watch everything. And then whenever they want to make a more of a administrative type of call where they want to block a traffic or block a port or a IP address, they may give us a according to the severity of it, they may give us a call and or email and ask for permission before doing so. Now, whenever you have an incident that happens, it's important to understand that not everybody that's involved with the security management team or security operations is actually going to be working on that problem to get it eradicated. But there are going to be where there are going to be some scenarios where your superiors, your managers, or you may need to report to higher up or upper management or your stakeholders and make sure that they understand what's going on and that you have a good grasp upon the issue. So you want to make sure that sometimes these communication plans are actually practiced, written out, and then presented in a way to where uh, normal people can understand what's going on, but at the same time not giving away so much information to where it could be detrimental later on. Now, some companies they have a playbook that they actually follow when it comes to incident response. They have some type of procedures that they follow. Now, these things could be uh, well documented, but at the same time, in my personal opinion, I think it could hinder you because you're looking for step one, you're looking to actually fulfill um, that task of step one, and it may not cause for that. Each incident may be different than the last, so it's good to have someone that's on staff to handle these incidents that can be versatile when it comes to understanding what is happening and then how to actually stop it and recover from that. So, but just to know that having a plan is always a good stage of attack, but being able to pivot at any given time is always a better point. Now, in order to help these teams, we have tabletops, simulations that we can have walkthroughs where we're given a scenario and then we're actually um, performing on our laptops or in virtual machines of what can actually happen, what should we do, how does it look into our environment. That's the great thing about virtual machines is that we can build an environment that looks like our business environment with applications and connections and everything that's entailed on our PCs or our laptops, and then we can drop a virus in there and see how it acts and see how we would react if that was the case. And so these tabletops, these walkthroughs, they are great learning tools in order to get great practice in when it comes to preparing ourselves for an incident. So let's go into incident response and then what's the difference between that and disaster recovery and then retention policy. Uh, Now, incident response, like I said, is it may be an attack that's not necessarily a disaster. It could lead up to it, I believe, but I think it starts off as something that can be handled within 24 to 48 hours. And it's something that should be handled by a group of individuals, such as our incident response team. Now, again, like I stated before, we can have plans for any kind of incidents. Such as, to give an example, someone left their laptop, their work laptop, on a plane, a business trip, right? And now we lost that data that's on that PC. So now that's an incident, and we need to take a certain steps in order to recover that data, make sure that that data is protected and is unreadable once it's lost, right? But in the difference between that and in a disaster is that a disaster is so bad of an incident that it may stop the business from existing. And if the business doesn't recover it within 2 weeks time or however long it takes for your customers to allow you to be down from service, it could end up in detrimental disaster like that. So we want to think of disasters as being either man-made or um, a force from God. So we're thinking tornadoes, um, earthquakes, things from man. Let's say someone burned down the building. So these are things that falls into a disaster type of a category, and we have different type of planning and recovery tactics when it comes to disasters. Now, when it comes to business continuity plans or retention plans, we want to make sure that these are things put in place that keeps the business running at all times. These are procedures that helps in a daily process of running the business, but not necessarily is these things, these retention policies and business continuity plans help in the disaster recovery standpoint, and it could come into play when it comes to incident response as well. But it's more built on a daily process of how do we keep our business making money and moving forward. Disaster recovery is bringing us back from a business ending an event and bringing us back in order to have coming back from literally nothing and then having business once again. And then incident response, like I said, could normally be something that could be recovered or we can move away from within 24 to 48 hours. Now, when it comes to identifying the incident, we have certain tools, certain controls that's in place. Not all the time are you just going to be watching the logs to see if any kind of incident or leakage has actually happened. This is where we have our IDSs, our intrusion detection systems, playing in a part. This is where we have our SIM, our security incident and event manager, actually looking at these logs, and if they see anything that's out of the way as an outlier, they should give you a warning on those things. These type of tools are put in place just to see that traffic flowing every day. Think about how many people you actually have working in a Fortune 500 company, and then how many people are actually sending emails out, sending messages from one space to another, sending things out to the cloud, pulling things down from the internet. So many things are happening as far as data moving back and forth that we have these controls in place just to see all of that data. And the it's our responsibilities as security professionals to know how to set the limitations on it and then have it alert us if there's any type of anomaly to those regular tasks that's being held on a daily basis. So this slide just kind of reiterates what I was saying on the previous slide when it comes to the security information and event manager management system, which is a SIM, a very good tool to put in place to watch that data flow back and forth and then give you alerts if there's any kind of issue that needs to arise. Now, your SIM system is not just made for alerts or just kind of plug and play, and it does need to be tailored and contoured to how you want these alerts to actually happen. So it's very important to have our staff train in these tools that we put in place. So just not I don't think that you can just get into a sim and just hit the ground running. It's a learning curve, especially when it comes to different vendors and different types of sim consoles. We want to get in there and see what works for us, what is the configurations that work well with our business plans, and see how do we want to be alerted. Do we care if we get an alert at 3 a.m. in the morning for someone logging on, or maybe we have a night crew? So we want to make sure that we tailor these type of dashboards, these controls to our business, and make sure that it works well for us and staying efficient. So the trend analysis, what we want to make sure that we understand when it comes to the trend analysis is the frequency and the volume base. So when it comes to my personal opinion, when it comes to what's an outlier to me is that how frequent something happens and then how much does it happen. So that's the volume. So how frequent it could happen, 3,000 times a minute, or it could happen every 3 months. The frequency, that's where I'm saying where you need to actually analyze what's what's weird to you. You know, when you're looking at the data and you're constantly seeing the same thing over and over and over again, but then you realize that someone took something out. Let's say money wise, someone actually took a penny out every day from everyone's account, and just transferred it to this one account over here. Now, a penny is low volume, but the frequency is high, so therefore it sticks out in my mind. Whereas if I'm taking $3,000 on a monthly basis, then the frequency is low, but the volume is high. So therefore, it kind of raises red flags, and that's the kind of things we want to look for when it comes to our data leaving out of our network, and seeing who's actually, where is it going, why is it going there, why so much at this time. So those are the type of trends that we want to look for. We also want to make sure that we have a good understanding of our logging systems, our logging platforms. Logs are going to keep everything basically written down for us. This is going to be our note taking when it comes to every PC, every server, any type of device that's on our network is logging down everything that it does. And we want to make sure that we understand where our logs are, and then how important they are when it comes to the accuracy. We want to make sure that we take away the permissions of people being able to delete logs. A good indication that you're probably been breaches. If you ever see any kind of deleted logs, you may want to go in to see who deleted them, and were they did they have the right permissions being on your network in order to delete logs. So just understanding that if something happens past business hours, a good way of understanding what took place is through your login system, and making sure that those things stay accurate is very vital. So I said that you have logs on your system, but you also have logs in your DNS system. And remember, DNS is where we get the domain naming system when it comes to knowing what IP address matches what actual name of a website. You also have logs there. We also have logs when it comes to VoIP call managers, and having these type of logs and history. Like I said, it gives us a better way of threat hunting, making sure that we can see what's going on when we're paying attention to something totally else. We may be in meetings all day, and then once we get some alerts, we want to go back and check the logs to see, can we confirm has a breach happened, or can we confirm something's going on without our consent. Now, metadata is the information about the information, or the information about the data. So this is when you creating a file. Metadata is actually the data that's about that file that's created, and it kind of, I want you to think of it as a data that lives on the backside of it. It's the information, the properties of that file, and it 9 times out of 10 is going to have things of time and date, and then who has permission to it. And if we're really high speed, we can have it set as if it's the categorization of it, as far as, is it a sensitive document or is it unclassified to where everyone can read it. But metadata is something that our DLP systems will use, our data loss prevention systems. So whenever we send a sensitive file out, our DLP system will read the metadata that's tagged along with it and say, oh, well, I'm not going to actually read the whole paragraph that's in this Word document, but I see in the metadata that it's a sensitive document. I'm going to flag it and make sure that it doesn't go out, and make sure that I, contact the person's manager and make sure that they're trying to send out some sensitive information based off the metadata that was created. So let's jump into this containment phase. And the containment phase is when we have identified the issue and we understand how to actually, we want to know what's affected and what's not affected. And then how do we isolate that? A lot of times what you'll see is when you get your security job, they'll tell you to just go ahead and have the user unplug from the network to stop the risk of spreading the virus, or the case of if someone's actually traversing at that time on the network, to unplug from the network, and now they can't go from your PC to the CEO's PC that's on the third floor. So being able to have that type of containment, it gets your hands on the problem and being able to say, okay, how do we want to take it from here? Now, having that network segmentation helps out with this immensely, because in the beginning of us actually architecting the network, we set a network segmentation up to where if someone gets into a particular network, that they can't just go to everyone's PC. Remember, we have different VLANs for different departments or different teams, and we can have that type of separation to where it can already make the containment phase even easier. So just keep those things in mind, that having that defense in depth within the planning stage also helps out when it comes to actually putting things in play, in motion, and you actually want to get things contained. So to dive a little deeper into the eradication, how do we actually stop the issue that's going on? Let's say if it's a virus, did our antivirus, will it work on this? Is it a 0-day attack? Are we able to actually clean the PC? And if we clean it, do we feel confident on putting it back on the network? Maybe we want to go ahead and to feel totally comfortable with leaving this box on the network is to actually re-image it, bring it back to its beginning state, clean all the data that's on it, and being able to put it back on the network. Or do we want to get rid of it altogether? Save the data that has been saved and what can be saved, and then move on from it and give that new user a whole new PC. Maybe we feel comfortable in that. So all those type of things goes into your planning stages, and also it could come at the end when it comes to post activity, lesson learns, and seeing, okay, for the next time this happens, we might want to just go ahead and re-image a PC. So those things need to, those questions need to be answered either during or pre-incident. And then when it comes to the recovery, each eradication may have some type of different way of actually recovering the information, and it doesn't always need to come from backups or just having those things come from your things that's saved on file. Maybe we need to actually give you a whole new PC, and that's how we recover the time that you spent without a PC. So I think the eradication part and the recovery part could be vetted out a lot better in the preparation part when it comes to business flow. So kind of jumping back to the network segmentation part, having those firewall configurations are very important when it comes to making sure that we have the information going out that we want, and we don't have the traffic that we are not aware of or we don't trust coming into our network. So we want to make sure that our firewalls are set up correctly, and then we want to make sure that we check those rules on an annual basis to make sure that, hey, do we have some old stale rules out there? Could we add some that we have came in kind of with? Who has access to our firewalls? Are they able to just add any type of rule that they deem to be beneficial? So all those type of things we need to, think about and then actually put into play when it comes to firewall configurations. A lot of our incidents comes from our users actually just doing their daily tasks and going out and onto the internet and looking at different sites in order to get their job done. And a lot of hackers will put these type of traps out there, just kind of seeing what they can catch. It's almost like casting a bait out there in a fishing line and seeing what catches. And we want to make sure that we have security controls such as our DLPs in place for our mobile devices. We want to make sure we have our mobile device management systems in place, just in case you get something on your phone. We can go ahead and remote wipe the phone. So we want to make sure that we think about our mobile devices. We want to think about when it comes to DLP, we want to think about how people are sending things out in emails. When we're thinking about our sending information out to a website or a cloud provider, we want to make sure we have our CASB in place to where it can scan those types of files and stop any type of sensitive data that's leaving out to these different types of cloud access providers. Now, as far as our endpoint configurations, we want to make sure that we have antivirus sitting on our PCs, some type of DLP agents that's sitting on our PCs, watching the flow of traffic, making sure that we can see things in the data sense of leaving that box. We also want to make sure that our end users are aware of the type of attacks that may happen within their PCs, but also in real life when it comes to social engineering. Not letting someone onto their PC just by intimidation factors. So they need to understand what type of vulnerabilities that they have, that they face when going to their favorite website or versus just coming to work that day and being approached by a total stranger. We also want to make sure that we have some type of application block list and allow list. Are we going to just allow any software to be on our PCs, or are we going to have hey, you can only have these set of 20 applications on your PC because you only need those applications to do your job. And if you don't need them, then we need to go ahead and just remove them. And then when it comes to actually getting let's say affected by virus, or so to say, will our antivirus quarantine that type of virus, or should we go ahead and jump into physical mode and then unplug it from the network? So our key points to review is that when it comes to incident response, it's not necessarily uh, it's not necessarily that you won't get an incident or become breach. It's a matter of fact of when. And when it does happen, are you going to be ready for actually uh, putting a plan in place, being able to identify your issue, being able to contain it, and then eradicate the issue, and then recover if necessary. But then after that recovery, are you going to be able to sit down, say, have a lessons learned or a post activity discussion, and then prepare yourself for the next one? Lesson 18. Let's talk about digital forensics. So whenever we have a incident that goes down, sometimes we need to actually hold that information or that data for law enforcement and for cases that may be held in a court of law. And so we need to run proper digital forensics on different types of workstations. So in this lesson, we'll go over different types of tactics and what we should look for when running forensics. So the key aspects of digital um, forensics is when you want to collect data evidence, I'm sorry, and data for code of law purposes. We want to make sure that it is accurate, and that it hasn't been changed by you or by anybody else, that could maybe be thrown out in the court of law if proven to be unreliable data. So we want to make sure that once we get our hands on that PC or that device, that we have a chain of custody and we have a list of individuals who's actually handling that device, and making sure that if we do have to log into it, that we document everything and any kind of changes that we made, because any type of discrepancy when it comes to that type of evidence data being messed with, then it's going to hold as a unreliable source and could be thrown out in the court of law. As you can expect, that whenever we're holding forensics for workstation or someone who may have been employed with the company, we're going to have reports, and making sure that these reports are just as accurate as the data that's on those workstations is very important. So we want to make sure that we have some ethics when writing these reports, and that we're not biased in any type of way. So we want to make sure that we stay professional, we tell the absolute truth, and then we make sure that the people who need to know about this information are informed of the reports, and making sure that they have access to it. Now, when searching on a PC or a workstation for different types of information, such as logs, any type of data that we may be looking for that can help us out in the proving what actually happened on that incident. Sometimes we can have our tools do a e-discovery electronically, looking for types of parameters and queries of pulling back that information in order to show us what's actually going on. This is where we actually we want to take advantage of our DLP systems, or our metadata tags that we have with our files. So whenever we create those files and we have metadata, or we tag them in a certain type of way, and what I mean by tag, meaning putting a tag of sensitive, or a tag of confidential. So when you have those tags and we have our tools go out there and search for them, we can see what has been tampered with, or what has been accessed with, pulled up by what user, and we can look into it like that. So having those e-discovery tools is very helpful when performing different types of forensics. Now, along with different tools that we can use to pull the data from those workstations, other tools that we can use to actually give us more support when it comes to providing evidence is videos, and we can use witness interviews. Did we see a particular person come in? Asking, individuals who work in that department, did you see anybody unusual? Explaining what happened to the situation without giving them too much away is a perfect way of getting more evidence that solidifies the data that we're going to provide in court. Now let's go to timelines. Timelines, along with those logs that we set up in every device that we have. This is why it's so important to have our logs have the proper timestamp of the operations, the hours of operations that we're working on, and to make sure that every device is synchronized when it comes to time protocols. Because when we go back and we want to validate the actions taken when it comes to gathering forensics, then we want to make sure that our time is right and we are not missing any logs, and that we can trust the time that are put on our logs in order to say, hey, this is a definite action taken at this point in time. So this is where we want to make sure that we got our SIMs in place and they have the proper logs set up to capture that type of information. We have the time protocols, like we said in the previous slides, to justify the actions taken, at that point in time. And we want to make sure that we look at the networking side of it. What logs do we have on our firewall? What logs do we have coming from our routers? And do they have the correct timestamps that match up with our SIM event logs when it comes to what we're actually trying to validate and say, hey, this happened at this time. So overall, we want to make sure that we get our data from our workstations as well as other resources. But we also want to know when we're directly working with a PC, what is the order of volatility. Um, Now, this is where information is stored in different parts of the PC, mainly in memory, and then it is there for only a moment of time, and then it goes away. It's deleted forever. It's lost forever. So, as we all know, um, everything that we do on our PCs is logged in some type of way, and is actually burnt into the hard drive. It's actually recorded there, and when we delete a file, we're just basically telling the computer that, hey, this file is no longer needed. You can rewrite over the file, but the file is never really lost. So if you don't know, when we clean or when we wipe a PC, we're constantly writing ones and zeros over all the data that's on that PC, causing it to be unrecoverable. Okay, it may happen 7 times or 50 times, right? In order to make that data unrecoverable. So, in a case of you're doing something wrong or a hacker has got into your PC, we want to see, when they first, let's say, delete a file, or they take some information off our PCs, or they they cause for something that they want to be hidden, they delete a file. Well, we can look into the memory and see if it's still there hanging out in a memory state, and then be able to pull it from there. Now we'll go into how we actually pull things from a memory, but you want to make sure that you understand the order of volatility, because it's once it's in the memory only for a period of time, then it's actually deleted forever within the memory. But if it's there on the hard drive, on a or let's say a USB or something more permanent, then it stays there for a longer period of time, right? So we want to make sure that we'll check our CPU registers and our cache memory. These they hold the shortest amount of time of holding information there in the memory. Then we want to make sure from there that we check our RAM. This is a non-persistent um, state. So it's whenever RAM is shut off, or the PC is actually shut off, completely off, then it wipes everything from RAM. You kind of see an example of this whenever you're working on something and your computer dies instantly. And then once you reboot it back up, it says, hey, I auto saved this stuff. You can pick it up back here, right? And so that auto save is how it throws information into the memory, and then you bring it back up. But it didn't save it to the hard drive. So if it would have stayed off for a period of time, then everything from the memory state would have been wiped out as well. So from there, we want to go to a more persistent data on a persistent storage. This could be temporary files that you see in your documents folders. If you go and you look into the directories somewhere on your C drive, you'll see some temporary files that can be stored there. They're not asked to be called on exactly all the time, but if a PC has them, they can refer back to them. But we tend to clear these things out from time to time. You'll see me a lot of times go to my internet options list and then clear out the history and the backup data, or the temporary files that's eating up a lot of the hard drive space, and we can clear that out. From there, number 4, you want to go to a remote logging or monitoring data. Is there any type of remote access into that PC? And did the information go across the network into a more remote state, where it's not actually living on the PC, but living in a outside source. So let's think about the cloud like that. Then you want to go into physical configurations, the network topology. Um, how do we actually have the PC set up? How is it actually on the network? Is it connected to everybody in the department, or is it available to everyone in the business? So and from there, finally, we want to look at archivable media. That's where your CDs, DVDs, USB drives, external hard drives, things that can be plugged into the PC and then taken away. So more than likely, information that's stored on these type of devices are probably edged in there, is written to that PC, to that external device, and living there for your assets. So I mentioned earlier about how you can take information from your memory and see if what's there, what did the computer dump into memory, and then we could pull that for evidence. How we actually go about doing that is with a in-case forensic tool. This is a design tool just for being able for security professionals to actually do forensic work and not compromise the integrity of the data. And so we need to, again, and I'm going to stress this point, that we need to be very careful when it comes to having data that we need to collect and put in a safe mode to where we can give it to a court of office, and it could be held up in a court of law. So we want to make sure that we have tools such as this in-case forensic tool, or the forensic toolkit, in order to give us the best chance of not compromising that data. So it's very important to understand that a lot of times when a PC is, they don't know what to do with the data that they collect, they'll dump it into memory. And so going back to the attack of buffer overflow is where, we give the system so much information to where it doesn't know what to do with it or where to put that information output from. So they will dump it into the memory. This also happens when you get a blue screen of death. And as you can see here on the screen, this is a blue screen of death. Well, a lot of times the computer will tell you what the problem is in the blue screen of death, or why did it do a blue screen, and it will dump it into a file, or dump it into memory for you to, once you turn it off, turn the PC off, and then turn it back on, you can go back to that file and see what caused that type of outage. So this whole time we've been talking about preservation and making sure that the integrity of the evidence is upheld. We don't change it in any type of way. We just stay clear of really just making sure that that is a valid state of data when it goes into the court. But as a security professional, it's our job to understand that whenever we're snooping around and going around a hard drive to look at different types of statuses on that hard drive, things are constantly changing. It's too easy for you to actually dilute the changes on a PC, and having the integrity to prove what you want to prove is very low. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we take a copy of that hard drive if possible. And what we want to do is we want to make sure we have a write blocker to actually copy that hard drive bit for bit. And then we can use the copy of the hard drive in order to do our investigations, in order to go through the different files, the different um, the different event logs to see exactly what happened, and then we can place the original hard drive in a protected bag or case or what have you, but we won't touch that at all. We will let the court handle with that. But in order to make our case, we will use that write blocker and then create a copy of the hard drive, make our case from the copy. Now, when it comes to also having some more preservation of the evidence, we want to make sure that, like I said, we have in that secure tamper evidence bag. That's where we want to put our original hard drive in. You also want to make sure that you stay away from any kind of electrical discharge that you may have in the office. So wearing some kind of static bands, or having that workstation on a non-static mat that we can do work on, and take that external hard drive out. I'm sorry, that internal hard drive out. We want to make sure that we have a chain of custody. The proper paperwork is going to be real big. You cannot just say, "Hey, Johnny, hold this," and then whenever we're ready for it, for the court date, you just bring it up. Because there's no way it should be. If we're gonna prove something, then there should be without a shadow of a doubt that only these people had it and no one else tampered with it. Because if it brings in any kind of doubt, then it's liable to be thrown out. So we want to make sure that we have a chain of custody, and if we have somewhere secure to put our equipment that we're gonna, present. Is it a cabinet that we're gonna put a locks on, maybe in a secure room, or is the whole facility needs to be locked down? So just some things to kind of keep in mind, that when you bring these things up into the court of law, these questions may come up to say, hey, okay, how much can I put trust into this? How can I say, hey, this didn't change because of you? So you want to make sure that we have that integrity piece of it when performing forensics. So lesson 19, summarizing risk management concepts. As we've been learning more and more about informational security concepts, we always kind of kept everything around the factor that we have risks. And we have risks of things being stolen, being viewed without permissions, risk of losing data due to storms, earthquakes, or hackers. So having a good understanding of what risk is very important, but then having the management of that risk is also equally important. So here on this slide, we want to go through the phases of risk management, which is understanding the mission essential functions. What do we have in place that makes our business run? Like, what is the minimum baseline that we can do in order for our business to still remain in business? How do we, can we still function with the bare minimum departments, resources? So we want to understand what is our understand what those things are, and then have understanding of what vulnerabilities may cause to those essential pieces. Because if we understand our vulnerabilities, and we understand that our vulnerabilities are attacking our essential baseline of what the business is, then we can understand what type of tools to put in place, what type of policies to put in place. So those first two things are very essential. And then the third thing is to identify the threats. We have the vulnerabilities now, but do we have threat actors that actually are active working on those vulnerabilities that threaten us? Then we need to analyze the business impacts. If one of these vulnerabilities were to take place, and we were to take a loss, is there some type of business impact that's needed? I'm sorry, is there some type of business impact that is affected on the business? Will we lose customers? Will we lose data that we can never get back? So we want to understand our risks when it comes to what things are in play, but then we want to understand the impact that it would have. And then 5, we want to identify the risk response. Whenever we are responding back to a risk or an incident, how do we go about responding in a proper manner? We also want to understand risk assessment. So risk assessment is the likelihood and the impact that you're going to have when it comes to, scheduling, not scheduling out, but when you're managing your risk. So we want to understand what is the likelihood of a tornado hitting our building. And then if a tornado does hit our building and then tears everything up, what is the impact of that? Can we actually hold business the next day? Can we everyone be remote while our business is being rebuilt on the brick and mortar side? So understanding the likelihood and the impact. Remember those two; they will come up in later in later slides as well as on your test. So we have different frameworks that help you with risk management, and a lot of times when you're dealing with big enterprises, they have these type of frameworks to put in place to help your personnel be able to manage this type of uh, task. Because if you think about it, it is a daunting task to see what all risk factors that you have going against your company. It could be a long list of them because you hear me constantly say, how does our data flow in and out of the business? How are we sending things out? How do we receive information in? And you have to know those type of things in order to know what risk could come out of that. So we have risk types. It could be an internal or external actor. External could be, a hacker from Germany, or something God made, where it's a natural disaster, flooding, hurricanes, things of that nature, or a person made disaster where it could be viruses, or any kind of denial of service where they're cutting the power to your building. So those are external risk factors. Internal will be more of the insider threats, your people who are actually employed by the building or by that business, and they have permissions already. They are in your system, and they are able to go to different folders and see those type of things. They can see what type of security system that you have inside the building. So those are your internal threats, risk factors. So you also want to make sure that you understand your external being the third party uh, factors. So not only are they external, you know, they are people that you trust because they are your third party vendors. So say Microsoft gives us Microsoft Office, and they give us a renewal license every year for the software, and they also can log into it remotely and help us out with troubleshooting. So we have to make sure that we account for them when it comes to the risk factor of um, us giving them our internal IPs and internal system names, just in case if they get hacked for any type of reason, we understand that our information may be lost in that factor. So when talking about risk management, 9 times out of 10, you're going to run across qualitative and quantitative assessments. And the easiest way to tell the difference is when you're talking about qualitative assessment, you're talking about something that has a number value associated with it, some type of price revenue, um, that's associated with that type of assessment. We have lost so much money due to this risk happening, or we could be subject to losing this much, right? And whereas qualitative is more of an opinion based assessment. So it will be, if this risk was to happen to us, our customers will think of, we may lose customers because they think that we're not a safe company to have personal records with. So you want to have a good understanding of that when it comes to the Security Plus test, and just understand that when you're talking about quantitatives, you're probably going to deal with these different factors, these risk factors here. You're going to deal with SLE, as single loss expectancy, your exposure factor, and then you also have a annual loss expectancy and a annual rate of occurrence. So all these things kind of factor in to how we actually get this assessment in a percentage wise of how do we determine if we stand a high risk of this vulnerability or if it's relatively low, right? So just to give a kind of an example where if we're in Nebraska, the annual rate of occurrence of a typhoon happening is little to none, right? So our risk there will be low. But on the flip end of that, where if you're in Nebraska where it's high in tornadoes, the annual rate of occur of that risk occurring would be high. Okay, so you want to keep those things in mind. Quantitative, remember, has uh, a a number value to it. So if we have a risk factor on our building being hit by a tornado, it will cause us $12 million to actually get everything back up and running, to have our essentials back up and running. We stand a chance of losing this every year. So the risk is high, right? Whereas qualitative is more of opinion based. What would our customers think about us if this was to happen to us, or we didn't protect this data in a certain type of way? So this graph here just kind of puts in a image of what I was just saying, where you have your risk factors laid out here on the left side, and then you have your impact. You think about each event, and then how would it actually impact the business when it comes to everyday resources, everyday tasks that my employees need to do. So we want to make sure that we look at each risk, and then we have a certain category that we want to judge that risk on. So when it comes to risk management strategies, we want to make sure that managing risk is a thinking's man game, where we're thinking ahead of what could potentially happen, and we want to make sure that we take everything into consideration, and that we have a mitigating factor for things that we want to accept or the things that we just can't avoid. So we want to make sure that if we inherit some risk, let's say, in a good example of that is that if we inherit the risk of a third party vendor, we want to make sure that we have mitigating factors in place in order to say, hey, if Broadcom gets hacked, we only gave them so much information of our employees' information to where they won't have to, it won't affect us as much as we given them all of this information and some of our secret information. So you want to make sure that you stay ahead of what others may give to you without you knowing, or you just inherit that risk factor just because you are a customers of theirs. So risk avoidance and then risk transference. We would love to avoid as much risk as possible, but when you think about risk avoidance, I want you to think about it in this factor. Sometimes we won't embark on a certain business venture just because we want to avoid that altogether. So to give an example, if I didn't want to run the risk of credit card fraud to my customers, or putting their information on servers that I wanted to protect, I could say, hey, we're only cash only business. So I'm not doing any type of uh, credit card transactions, debit card transactions. I only want cash. That way I don't have to worry about PCI DSS, right? So I can just say, hey, I'm avoiding that risk altogether. Whereas transference, where that's where you want to think about insurance, cyber insurance, all right? So let's just say I put cyber insurance on my data center. And now if my data center is subject to flooding, I can call up my insurance company and say, hey, we experienced this, and I can get a funding to rebuild my structure. That's transferring the risk from um, your accept. That's transferring the risk from you to a third party. Okay. Now, having a risk acceptance is where we are willing to take on the risk and the consequences of that risk, right? Maybe we can't avoid it. Maybe we can't transfer it. We can't mitigate it. We're willing to take it on and accept the risk because of the company business wise will be able to still function even if this was to happen to us. So um, I think a good bullet here is not to ignore the risk. You want to understand that the risk is there because maybe it worsens over time and maybe it turns into, okay, we need to avoid this. But if we can accept that risk and just say, hey, I'm willing to take on that risk, just know that. Now, in order to make that type of decisions, you need to understand your risk appetite. What are you willing to lose? And what is an unacceptable um, margin for you and for the company. So, if you're willing to lose $10,000, but not willing to lose 50,000, then that sets your appetite to, hey, I want my appetite to be around 15,000. I can't really do anything more than that. So that's your risk appetite. Now, all for this slide, I've been saying that how we need to, think ahead of the curve, understand the layout, and then how are we vulnerable in different types of areas. This is just being risk aware, understanding the things that are threatening your company, and then how do we actually manage those type of factors. But we create matrix like the chart that you seen earlier, um, to kind of give a visual aspect to it, so everyone can kind of get on that same board of saying, oh, okay, it's this is the threat, but at the same time, this how dangerous it could be. This is how we set in the mitigating factors for it. So we have different matrix to show that visually, but then we also have different graphs from other third parties to kind of give us a help when it comes to looking at each risk factor, because it could be 10,000 different reasons why you stand a risk in your company. But that's why it's so important to have a baseline in order to say, okay, these things matter to me, and if I can defend against these risk factors, then we stand a good chance of being okay when it comes to running business. Now, we talked about a little bit of the impact that it has on a business. Just realizing that when you stand risk of a threat, that you need to understand, if it was to happen, how could it cripple the company? And if it's so much of a detriment to the company, maybe we want to think about avoiding that risk altogether. Or how do we mitigate it to where it's acceptable um, to our board members? So having a business impact analysis, it sets that up to where we are looking at the impact of cost. We're looking at how often does it happen. These things come into play, and instead of reacting to when a threat happens, we already have a good understanding of what it is before it actually happens. So during this lesson, you constantly heard me say, find out what that baseline is. What is the mission, essential functions, the resources that you have when it comes to your business? And understanding what those resources are gives you a better understanding of what type of risk that you face, and then what type of security controls that we need to put in place. Um, Now, in the slide that you see here, the workflow has the data going through different types of servers, And if one of those servers were to break or to go down, what's the maximum tolerable downtime that we can have in order for business to still remain functioning? Or what's the maximum downtime that we can have to where our customers are not complaining about business? So we want to make sure that we understand that time frame. We want to understand what point that we want to recover back to when it comes to the data loss, or what was lost during the disaster, or the interruption of workflow. Can we go back to that one particular time, or do we need to go back further? Um, we need to understand these types of functions so we can, have a better understanding of our risks and a better plan that once these things, these incidents happen, we can instantly put into action a recovery plan. So in to add on to finding out what's our baseline, we also want to make sure that we identify what are the critical pieces, servers, desktops, people that are critical to our business being functional. Making sure that we have set ourselves up for a redundancy, meaning if one of our critical pieces were to go away, that it can fail over into another desktop server. Person can pick up that information and keep the business running. So we want to make sure that we identify all of these assets and making sure that we know their roles, and then we know how critical they are when it comes to the processes of making our business run. So you kind of heard me say having that redundancy. This goes into single points of failure. Whenever we have one router that's routing all of our traffic, then the attacker has one point of attack. Let's take that router out, and then now this business has no way of communicating outside or within the internal as well. So we want to have maybe two, three routers that's routing traffic or is on a standby. The same thing when it comes to desktops. Maybe we want to make sure everyone in the business has a desktop, but we have a spare lot where we keep 20, 30 PCs imaged, ready to go with applications, ready for distribution at any given time. Because if Larry comes into the office one day and he forgets his laptop, then I don't lose production for that day because I can give him a spare laptop from our spare bin. I will retrieve that at the end of the day, and then it goes back into my spare parts. So keeping that flow of just making sure that you don't have a single point of failure. Remember, it just doesn't have to be workstations or routers. It can be personnel. If Susie's out today and she's the only one that can cash checks, that's a single point of failure. Now we can't cash checks for that day. We need to train someone else to have that permission whenever Susie's out. Okay, so we want to make sure that we eliminate that as much as possible. So let's go into disasters. What is it? What could be considered a disaster? Nine times out of ten, my mind goes to some type of natural disaster, earthquakes, floods, fires, um, tornadoes, power outages. Anything God made would probably be considered natural disasters. But man-made disasters could be any type of vandalism to the building to shut off power, or um, viruses, things of that nature. But when we think about the word disaster, I want you to think about what could possibly happen that could cripple the business so much to where it doesn't survive in the next 3 to 4 hours if it doesn't recover, right? So take Amazon for example. A disaster for Amazon will be losing connectivity to the internet. If somehow, some way, the internet has all faltered on all of their data centers, and no one is able to reach Amazon.com and get their orders, two, make new orders. Um, how long will customers allow that to happen? And that's what we mean by a disaster. Something has happened to where it has crippled the effect of the company so much to where we're scrambling to get back to just a working baseline. All right. So um, to go off that example, if Amazon is down for the next 3 hours, they may lose a quantitative amount of $3 billion, where qualitative wise, a lot of us may think, I'm not going back to Amazon.com. You know what? I'm gonna order it off of eBay. And now the risk assessment of the people at Amazon needs to take those things into consideration. Of this is the effect of the disaster. Okay, the $3 billion that we could lose or we have lost, and then the potential of our customers taking their business elsewhere. And these are the things that we want to keep in mind when it comes to a disaster. These are major events that we need to plan for, have a remediation plan for, and then a recovery plan for it. Okay. So that goes into the next slide of disaster recovery plans. These plans need to be well thought out, methodical, um, need to kind of be able to capture any scenario. And more importantly, they need to be exercised every year on an annual basis. Remember that. And that's not just because it's going to show up on your test, but it's going to show up in real life too. Whenever us as security professionals, we are going over our disaster recovery plans, we need to actually have our employees practice those type of events, practice the tasks that we have laid out in our DR plan, a disaster recovery plan, because once it happens for real, we need to actually put things in motion. We need to fail over our network to a backup system or a backup network and make sure that we're able to get out to the internet and we're not troubleshooting something that we should have troubleshot when nothing was going on. So we want to make sure that we are constantly going over the planning of it. But then once a year, we want to take a week, maybe when the business is slow, and we want to take that week and dedicate it to actually putting the disaster recovery plan into action. And for some of you, you actually seen this happen. It goes by many different names, walkthroughs, workshops, um, different functional exercises in the military. They just call it training. So these are exercises, like I said, to get you ready for a disaster. That way, whenever a disaster does happen, it causes less panic, and we have things in place to keep the business running and surviving.